So, much like anything else, Farage is just the pimple that will not go away. It's the smell that lingers even though the dog has died and left the house many years ago. It's the cigarette smoker that lived in a house before that will always bizarrely remain, despite no matter how much you've changed the carpets and whatever, there's still that bizarre lingering cigarette smoke on the bizarre summer windy day when everything's blowing through the house. It's still there. And of course, Farage recently has made a new threat of making a new party. And you're like, well, hold on, why is he making a threat to make a new party? Well, Farage is reckoning on the fact that Brexit isn't going to go well because there are still really two scenarios that could go down. And as I've said yesterday, there's very much a possibility I think it's going to be more one than the other. But Johnson is either going to have to get real with reality and go, we can't afford to go for a no-deal Brexit during this time, so let's extend the transition period by another year or two to let's try and get some form of a deal. The other will be that he just pulls the trigger on a no deal and essentially just crashes the car, and it's the car crash we've all seen coming. And he says that if Johnson triggers an extension, that he will have gone soft on Brexit. Not just that, but in other regards as well with negotiations. Farage has said he's going to trigger a new party. And his hope generally is that people will be so miffed off by this, because Johnson went soft on Brexit, even though you literally have Johnson is literally driving the car off a cliff. Even then, Farage could even do a party based on the anger that Brexit wasn't done right, and it's not the Brexit people wanted for. You'll notice once again that phrase is going to rear its ugly head in the future. I've already guaranteed it that one day it will appear on the Express, Daily Mail, and I've said I will buy that paper and I will hold it up and say I told you so, because it will happen. This is not the Brexit we voted for will be the phrase, the rallying call, I think, for Farage's new party to try and do whatever and basically go even more hard right than the party is. Remember, Farage has always been a very far and hard right Tory, even more so than the people in the ERG at the moment. The ERG are free market fundamentalists, but Farage is not only that, he's even more hard right when it comes to social reforms, welfare, prisons, whatever, you name it. He's hard as right as you can be. So, it was obvious to no one's surprise on LBC recently, he announced that he would make a new party. And thus we come from this, again from the New European, Nigel Farage hints he will start a new party if Boris Johnson goes soft on Brexit. Surprising no one. Because, put it this way, 2020 has been a bit of a disappointment for Farage. Farage this year was fully expecting to go and take on the very, very lucrative public speaking circuit in the US. However, because of the coronavirus, it's sort of put his plans to shame. He could have done that and basically lived off the money he got off that for quite a number of years. However, the US speaking circuit is pretty much a flash in the pan. You've got to do it when your fire's still hot. If you don't, you're not going to get as much money as you could have if you'd done it when your fire was burning brightest. And at the moment, that was it. After all, this was going to be Farage's final victory lap of Brexit. And going to the US and saying, haha, look how amazing I am, look what I did, and pandering to all the conservative wet dreameries all over there about the evil EU and fighting the government and regulations and all that. I'm sure he was going to get paid, billions at the end of the day. But of course, the coronavirus put paid to that. So Farage potentially now needs a new gravy train. So Brexiteer Farage said that he was conflicted about calling for Dominic Cummings to leave his post before Brexit is delivered, because he believed that it would lead the Prime Minister to taking a softer approach. He said, "I'm terribly conflicted over this. We need Cummings to be there for the next few weeks. Those of us that want Brexit, because if suddenly disappeared, maybe because Boris would go soft, we could finish up extending the transition period." He continued, "So whatever I think about him, it's irrelevant. A big chunk of me says it's important that he's there, but the other part of me can't help that things like the cock and bull story about going to Bernard Castle to test his eyesight. I mean, what do they take us for?" Farage also used the one-year anniversary of the European elections to claim that he is willing to take on Johnson again if he does accept an extension or takes a softer approach on Brexit. It follows the EU chief's Brexit negotiator Michel Barnier that the bloc would be open to a 2-year extension as focus turns to the coronavirus pandemic. He tweeted, "1 year ago today, the Brexit Party stunned the establishment and easily won the European elections. Without Mrs May, we would have implemented and we would have left, and there would be no Brexit on the 31st of January. Let us hope that Johnson frees us from the transition. Otherwise, we'll do it again." It was a reference to his plans to launch a new political organisation, with Farage previously talking about forming the Reform Party as a rebrand for the Brexit Party, should the Tories fail to deliver on their pledges. He said, "We might need to rebrand as the Reform Party. Definitely our appetite for it is political reform. This country wants political reform. It's sick of the whole bloody system. Sick of the whole lot." Now here's an interesting plot, because I too am for political reform, but I'm certainly not potentially for the forms that Farage might want to bring. You see, an AV system, which would definitely bring a true political reforms to this country, it would keep the Tories and the people who Farage wants in power out permanently. For you see, an AV system based on the actual percentage of what people voted for, the Conservatives would never be in. They'd never get more than at least what we've seen from all the elections, and based on the percentage, they would never get more than about 30-35%. They would never, ever be in power ever again. So, you might have to ask yourself, why does Farage, even though he knows this information is there, what reforms and political reforms would he potentially want to do? Might he, for example, want to make a alternative vote system like I put forward there, but start to draw boundaries on it, maybe like they do in the US, where even though Republicans, and you look at the percentage of the vote, ultimately the state would go to a Democrat if that was true. In reality, because the Republicans got to draw the lines, they now win that seat outright all the time. So, as much as, again, I would want political reform, supporting Farage on what he potentially want to do will not be in the best interest for this country or actually delivering any sort of political reform. Indeed, what Farage may actually try and do is deliver what's called a top-down revolution rather than a bottom-up revolution, which is what I would prefer. A top-down revolution basically says, let's change the guy in charge, maybe change a few names, and let's say the revolution is done and over. You saw this a lot in Prussia, where revolutions were firming and fermenting, and then they would do a top-down revolution. This worked quite significantly for many years. It quelled a lot of dissent in Prussia. It did work quite well. Other countries have done similar things. That's the only one I can think of right now, but other countries have done similar things. So we have to be careful about falling into that trap of saying that he wants reform and joining him in those reforms. We've actually got to find out what those reforms he wants, and would it be worth, shall we say, infiltrating and then subverting what he wants to do, which could be a valid political strategy. So, anyway, he continues. We talk about Washington as the swamp, and we are beginning to talk the same way about Westminster. Several local Brexit Party social media rebrands have already rebranded as the Reform Party. So it's coming regardless. And I think, given the fact that I don't think, because Farage, regardless of whatever he does, he can spin it, Brexit being not the Brexit people wanted. And again, Farage carries that brand name. People know he is. And he can, again, continue that whole populist stint because, again, Brexit was sold to people. And again, Farage was behind that selling of it as that it was going to be the thing that helped change people's lives. Because, again, smoke and mirrors, got to get it off the fact that it's this Tory austerity that's really been ruining lives for people in this country for over a decade and making it difficult for people. So, yeah, we have to be careful. We have to be at least up on what Farage actually wants, because once again, Farage is saying, let's reform the political system, and then not actually talking about what the political system actually is. So, once again, please be careful about falling into this trap. Now, once again, I've said I would like to reform this. So, what if, for example, Farage actually went with my idea? Would I support Nigel Farage in doing that? I would, because it gets a political system of what I want that would actually bring true political change to this country. But once again, you have to be careful about supporting this guy, because there's no reason to say this is what he promises, gets in, and then doesn't deliver on what he promised, or changes it to deliver, as I said, the system that keeps him and his buddies in power. That's what we have to be careful of.